baseline count for qualifying personnel. So both individuals employed by the LEA and also contracted services, and their planned use of the grant funds, so additional qualifying personnel, either hired or contracted by the LEA. Plans, as you can see on the backup documentation for this item, plans have been approved for 39 school districts, 38 charter schools, and 3 regional service centers. $11.7 million has been awarded thus far. So with that funding, LEAs have planned for an additional 188.32 FTE. So as you can see, that figure includes both LEA employed and contracted individuals. Overall, that represents an increase in qualifying personnel of about 18%. Currently, board staff is working with LEAs on making secondary awards where LEAs can match to fully distribute the available $14.2 million in funding for the first year of the program. Also, there's a Qualtrics survey out there for LEAs to demonstrate the hiring of qualifying personnel. So currently, we have 51 personnel documented as LEA hires. And for those 51 personnel documented, this includes data reported from 18 school districts and 18 charter schools thus far. And the plan is to come back to you in January for a further update. The reason why it's January is that LEAs have until the end of December to document their hiring for this first year of the program. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any members? Jill, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question on, you said something about for the additional funds, because there's 11.7 million and there's 14 point, what, 2?
Yes.
And so when you said they could do a qualifying or a matching to get the additional funds, are those only the 39 districts that have been approved, or can be others?
My understanding is that it is of the LEAs who have applied thus far.
And were approved?
And were approved, yes.
How come these 2 schools or districts weren't approved?
They did not apply for the program.
Okay. And we only have 38 charters, so how come they didn't apply either?
Correct, yeah.
Wow.
Yes, that is correct.
That's amazing to me. There's money there and we don't apply. All right. Anybody in the audience have questions they want to ask about this program? Okay. Maybe. Could be. Okay, any other questions? All right, Jill, thank you so much. All right, we are on to 4.4. We're going to have a discussion on requests for data and information. Who's doing that? Oh, Scott, okay.
In the backups, there's several pieces of information. First one, or the ability, if you will, for any finance committee members, and of course, you know, this is part of the overall board packet. These are the links that should any board member or the public want more information on EdFi and SEDS. You know, these presentations have been brought to the board of where we're headed as far as our data standards go, provided, you know, that the board approve those standards or those elements. We'll always make sure of that. But these 2 links right here allow for further drill down capability, if you will, or information regarding EdFi and or SEDS. Next one is this board meeting actions from the last PMR board, which is the USIMS-centric program or action item status. Most of this information was requested by Chair Huntsman. So if you want me to...
So why don't we skip that in case he gets back?
Sure. Then, and this is all relevant information, the next 4 items in your backups are specific to items or pieces of information or actions that public education appropriations or the legislative fiscal analysts are asking for further action by Public Education Appropriations Committee in their October meeting. your key takeaways, so if you go into the 2019 interim fiscal note and budget item follow-up report, issue brief, basically, I'm just going to take you through the first three paragraphs of the summary. The report reviews a limited number of fiscal notes and budget items from the past legislative session, assess the accuracy of earlier estimates, report the current status of associated initiatives, and recommend potential future budget actions. It assesses the work of the state agencies and institutions as well as the Office of the LFA. The findings not only relate to the specific initiatives themselves, but they will also improve the accuracy of future fiscal notes and budget items. So they reviewed over 305 budget items, but this report is going to be specific to, I'm going to go through with you specific items related to public education. And what they do is they look at implementation, accuracy, and performance. So if you scroll down further, you can see the index of budget items reported. Just keep scrolling through that. It's quite long, but then we get into, beginning on page 5, we get into the specifics or specific information that you as finance committee members need to know, and that the board needs to know will be talked about or discussed in Public Education Appropriations Committee. So for instance, during the 2017 general session, Utah Schools for the Deaf and the Blind was appropriated money. They estimated it to be, you see that bar or that column of what the estimate was, how much they've spent already, and then the projected by fiscal year end, how much they'll have spent. Then it gives you the explanation. The legislature appropriated a total of $14.9 million of one-time funds for that purpose, for DFCM to basically build the Springville campus. Then they provide to the Public Education's Appropriation Committee, which we're providing to you today as the Finance Committee, issues of interest. Then they also provide, and this is the key takeaway, is the potential action. So the LFAs are recommending that for capital development projects requests that come before the legislature, DFCM prepares a list of design elements for which costs could be reduced through the value engineering process, and for each element include a comparison between the element's cost and the proposed value cost as proposed and the value engineering cost. What the LFAs do is then they approach your staff, in this case USDB staff, and they say, do you support, are you neutral, or do you oppose what we're going to present to the Public Education Appropriations Committee? So you can see here that the LFAs approached USDB, and USDB came back and said, well, we support, but we agree with this recommendation. I've made this part of our process for the projects that are funded in this session as well as future projects. Then the next one is charter school professional development grants. These were grants that were appropriated during the 2015 general session. So again, the LFAs are, advising or following up Public Education Appropriations Committee members, just like your staff does here, on the implementation of that program. So they explain it, and then they give the issue of interest, which is, the Board of Education issued the first request for this program in May of 16, but did not approve a resulting contract due to complications. So that's what we reported back to them. And again, following the logic or the process of each one of these, potential action that the LFAs are recommending or asking from the Public Education Appropriations Committee is, due to the reported problems which finding a qualified vendor, the fact that there are less costly alternatives, we recommend that the legislature eliminate the $200,000 ongoing, the remaining balances from prior years to targeted outsourced regional seminars, professional development grants. They approached the State Charter School Board staff. My understanding is Director Lambert gave this response because, we consolidate all the response before, and this was her response. Now, they do put that under the State Board of Education response, and I know there's, some clarity on board or things like that, but they're neutral on this. And why this is important is because the October meeting, while these are important for you to vet, is it is informational right now, but it'll be in the October board meeting when you, Chair Belknap, report back to the full board. So if the board has, interest in saying, well, maybe we don't agree that we're neutral on it, or we don't agree that we should oppose it, or that's why we're providing you this information now, is it will go, in front of the full board next month. Which point, and, Lorraine and I have talked about this too, she's the board secretary, that my understanding is we could make this an action item if you as the finance committee say, we recommend that we do, or we can keep it informational. We always want to make sure that we're putting in front of you what is going to go up in front of the legislature as in a timely manner as possible. So that if you're asked questions about, any one of these, at least you have some situational awareness of knowledge of where it's coming from, why it's in the process or in the queue with that.
Is this, sorry, Scott, is this heading up September or October?
October.
Okay, and so another question I have is, I'm surprised that the charter board came back neutral on $200,000 that they need for training when training is so needed. So I'm kind of surprised at that. And so, but I'm also, here's this other one, the Carson Smith one, that they got an additional appropriation, and yet they still aren't going to use that. So, and anyway, so a couple of thoughts I have, and committee, you may have something different. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't send this out separately to the full board so they know the importance of reading this brief, and if they have any concerns about the asked question and the response, that we have time to get that back as part of as an ongoing discussion, not as an emotion or an emotion either.
So Chair, if you want, we can,
We don't have to do them all, but.
Yeah. Then, for instance, there's one with the teacher salary supplement, right?
Yep.
The 2018 general session. They provide the, items of interest. And then they, their potential is, we recommended the State Board of Education address the anticipated over expenditures of program funding using available statutory mechanisms, namely reducing the supplement as a pro rata basis or shifting funding within the line item balance. This was a question that was brought up today in the discussion with TSSP, is what can we do? How was this derived? So staff initially said, support this just from the aspect of how we explain it, right?
But you could do one of two things here. You can go get more money. We can use discretionary, use discretionary money, or you can reduce the 4,100 that goes out to teachers. So there's three options here, and I'm not sure all three were presented today.
Well, they weren't presented today because we were focused on
Right,
2021.
I get that.
This is, and also knowing that we were having, or, providing this information in today. Elementary counseling and trauma-informed practices is next. Then you have the public school revisions, which we finally were able to fill that position. We had a tough time finding individuals to take that position. So we opposed them taking basically what amounted to vacancy savings because of how long it took us to fill that position.
Right.
With the 107,400. Then you have, state board program support FTEs, similar circumstance here. It's a while to fill these positions, so it results in vacancy savings, or, because it's vacant for 3-4 months. Let's get the money, we oppose that as well.
But then we can use that as discretionary funds.
We can,
Okay.
well.
Can we? Or is it restricted?
Yeah, we can probably, but more along the lines of what, so it was intended to fund the position. We can use that money to help that position succeed and.
Okay, all right.
Stays in that bucket.
Okay, thank you.
STEM group simulations, we were neutral on that. That pretty much concludes all of the items that will go in front of the Public Education Appropriations Committee. These actually were presented to PTA, but, no action was taken yet, to my understanding. So that's why we're making sure we put it in front of you, so that, I want to say, no, let's, to your point, Chair, let's put it in front of the whole board so the whole board can see what staff are recommending, whether it's support, neutral, or.
Well, there's gotta be two foods for thought, and here I am just butting right in. But two foods for thoughts, they've already seen it, it's been there, it's in their backups, but do we need to make it more prominent in their minds, or do we just say this is going before the legislature and put it back in as backup for next time? You know, or do, you know, what do you think, Chair?
I think you put it back in backup, because
It's there.
it's already there, it's already relevant. Item.
Okay,
And it'll be transferred over your report that you give the board
Right.
in October. So
are you
all the
okay with
backups
that, committee members,
transfer
to
over it.
keep it in backup? Okay, all right,
Okay.
okay.
Next up, for information purposes, specifically related to legislative processes or actions that are taking, undergoing, or on their way through the Public Education's Appropriations Subcommittee, is the Enhancement for At-Risk Students Program and Administration. It provides background on the program, and staff really feel this is a value add by providing information to you as Finance Committee members, but then also ultimately the whole board, because there's going to be, and has been, all programs are important, but this is one particular program that has a lot of interest. As you know, last session, the governor's proposal, there was a lot of focus on the enhancement for at-risk students. They do make some recommendations here. To me, they're pretty supportable in the sense that, hey, you know, we need to establish metrics. And then in concert with the 2023 program review. So what they're alluding to there is in the bill that approved the appropriation for this particular program is that in 2023, we have to evaluate the program. Again, the governor's office made a recommendation on how to fund years. You know, you'll hear that term, years, enhancement for at-risk students, with this condition or the caveat that we come back, or the legislature put this in, that everybody comes back and first we establish the metrics, then we're going to come back in 2023 and see if we met those metrics given the funding that was provided from last legislative session. Well, actually all of it. We need it. There is a budget issue with it. You know, one of these ongoing debates about weighted pupil uniform categorized program. There's lots of good information in there along the lines of that debate. You know, put all the money in the WPU, keep it as a line item. This is really good background or good information on that ongoing question, not just for years, but other programs as well. Then they provide an analysis why it's so important to provide at-risk funding. Shows the number of students that fall into the category of economically disadvantaged, and then English language learners, what the value of the WPU is there. And that's what they're doing, is they're providing information to the Public Education Appropriations Committee members. They can make an informed decision. Other great information on the budget tables, the distribution process or how it works to the locals, their reported revenues and expenditures local education agencies, and then performance metrics already. You see reference to Education Elevated and the Utah Achievement Gaps. Of course, Education Elevated will change to the board strategic plan, so that all gets addressed and incorporated as part of this process with the Public Education Appropriations. Okay. Next up, that's getting a lot of attention, obviously, will be both in the interim period and then again in the next legislative session. Youth in custody, a lot of the same approach here as far as, hey, what are the issues? What information do we need to provide to Public Education Appropriations Committee? What the purpose of the youth in custody appropriation is or was? The detailed tables, that show the appropriation amounts, the distribution, where the funding comes from, the budget performance over time. Always has a performance metrics category in there. Key takeaway from all of these as Finance Committee members is to really, I recommend that you focus on the recommendations. What are the legislative fiscal analysts recommending to the Public Education Appropriations Committee? If you feel, you know, you need to come out and support this or provide other salient level details that might help the committee members, Public Education Appropriation Committee members make a decision. So, you know, their recommendation, the LFA's recommendation to Public Education Appropriations relates to youth in custody is that they, or that the State Board of Education evaluate contracted programs and develop performance metrics for the youth in custody program to help inform policymakers on the following. So when these were brought up in Public Education Appropriations meeting in August, I turned to Patty and said, hey, you know, it's better to start on this and get the metrics identified. And so she's already reached out to staff and we're moving forward in getting the metrics. And that's why we need to make sure that we let you know that we're doing that. Staff we're on it and we're.
Okay, Scott, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you're talking about making the metrics to measure and make sure these sweet babies and youth in custody are looked after, how are we stepping on toes of that facility who are already doing that kind of things, and are we working with them to make the metrics?
Yeah, I feel very strong in being able to attest that it's an interactive process between us and the facility. That's Patty's staff.
How many YIC locations are there?
That I'd have to come back with. I don't know that off the top of my head. So
Oh, you don't know either.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know like in Granite, there's at least 5,
Right.
for example. Just
Yeah. In Davis County. So I'll come back to that.
I'd be interested. And
Well, that's what the purpose of this agenda item is to provide you information, but then also allow the opportunity for any of the members to ask us, you know, to follow up with.
do we have any, are there YIC places in every corner of the state for these kids? Or some of them have to get shipped out of their areas?
Cammy will capture your questions and then I'll
Okay,
follow
good.
up.
Which is a really good question as you're talking about this, because even with the appropriation, it'll be ready for that same
Yeah.
background, and that it would be nice. Serving wares.
Yeah, it might be interesting, huh? And funding, is it distributed by each location, or the number of kids in each location, or the maximum beds in each location?
My understanding is by this number of students or the program, so to speak.
At that
Well,
moment.
I'll clarify that. Yeah, at that well, at the time that the formula is, at the time the appropriation and the allocation.
So when is that still like an October 1 deal,
Or
or is that a different time?
I'll check on that. I'm pretty sure it is. It's all part of the roll-up of the head counts and what
Okay.
location.
All right.
The coding of where the student
Where
is.
kids are.
Right, where they are. But I'll validate that. So
All
Cammy
right.
capture that one too.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, that's what we do. Helps me too, helps all of us, you know, understand. Next, or the last piece of item is for information purposes is adult education. Same flow, same format. So if you want to just, you know, cut right to it, I'll drop down. On, let's see, page 1, recommendations, with the close of the first year of the combined program, we recommend Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee further study the following. Now again, this is not your staff's recommendation, the LFA, their staff's recommendation. Verify that the LEAs are not commingling student counts and performance data between the two programs, and then request that the board report during the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee in October differentiated student counts between the two program components. Since then, we have got indications of what the agenda is in for October. So at the October board meeting, I'll make sure that all the board members know that what the final agenda is. But we'll be prepared.
And if we present, or if we're just giving him the documents?
You always see it. We always share the public education appropriations agendas with
Right.
leadership, and yourself as the chair. So, once they solidify that with their chairs, I'm talking about the LFA staff again, they'll know that was a recommendation, is that we, the board, come back and report to them. This is why we feel it's important to make sure that you're aware of this, because again, you might get a constituent that says, hey, I heard, the adult education program is being looked at or reviewed. At least you have some background and some information on what's going on.
But sometimes we don't even get to speak to these. They just take them as documents.
Yeah,
So that's why it's
Yeah.
important that they're really clear like this.
Well, and I will say this, in this way, since I've been in this position, Ben and all the chairs that have served in public education appropriations, if we ask to speak to it, they'll accommodate us. They're really good about wanting to hear from the board and your perspectives, because your perspective is your constituents' perspective. You're trying to provide or represent what they feel.
Close, but maybe not.
I know it's tough. They're always wanting to see or hear from you.
Divided into
They know that it's
180,000
staff
pieces,
that
people.
represent you, so.
Close as we can get it.
Thank you,
So,
Scott.
subject to any questions, this, concludes this particular agenda item. Yes.
You want to come up, Jared? Did you need something?
Oh, yeah, because remember Chair
Yeah, you
Huntsman had.
put it on.
Oh, yeah, we
Good job, yeah. So,
well,
Chair.
we would have just ignored him
Yeah.
completely.
You had stepped out temporarily, but you had asked for some specific deliverables or information or a little bit more visualization, if you will, of the data that we provided last month. So for yours and the interest of the other finance committee members, Jared's staff reconfigured the presentation a little bit and provided to you. First and foremost, the request was staff will provide this committee, with a list of USIM stakeholders. So that's here for your review. It lists all of the members of the user committee or the functional advisory. Yeah, say that again.
Functional Advisory Board.
Functional advisory board. For the USIM
Fab.
system.
That's awesome.
Fabulous.
Fabulous. Just by the way, up here, can I just throw this out?
Okay.
That we right here are streaming in standards and assessment. So they are seeing us.
Are they?
They're seeing us in standards.
In standards.
Flash finance.
We're gonna power on.
Just thought I'd tell you that.
Finance committee sign. Then the second, let's see, hold on. First request, so what we did was the committee action, that we work on the vision from the USIMS work group to align the verbiage with the board's strategic plan. That action is being worked during their first FAB meeting scheduled for the third week in September. So that's coming up, obviously. And I just went through the info request number 2, which was the members of the FAB. And then the third info request was the committee requested a more detailed budget review of financials to include a resource and cost chart. So they've moved that a little bit. Now, there was one other correction we need to make.
I had Cammy
You
replace
did?
it,
Okay, so
we
it's
made
all
it-
straight.
This is correct.
This is all correct for the program and fiscal year with the project. Then if you drop down, we give you more details or specifics, if you will, on what the plan is for expenditures across the applicable expense and encumbrances by category based on our systems. Then we provide what I feel is a better visualization of where we are at right now with the spending, the total program, the different or initial USB funding. So initially we got the 5 million. There was the cactus funding, kind of repurposing that the legislature did, and then the legislative funding that we received, which was the 17.2 million, all broken out for you. So you can see, because there's a lot of interest in USIMS, obviously. A lot of legislatures ask this question: is where are we? Are we executing the funding? We asked for a lot of money. We completely understand that. I'd anticipate that the cactus funding will start to get executed here pretty soon. That's about the only one, or is the only one at this point, that remains unencumbered or uncommitted. It's a small amount comparatively. I mean, every dollar counts. $746,000 is a lot of money. I understand. that money is specifically or needed or necessary to be used towards new Sims, but solving a lot of the issues that we're experiencing and have experienced in the past, called the cactus system. So subject to any questions, this finally concludes the agenda item. And I appreciate Jared reminding us to come back to this.
Thanks, Jared, but don't you just love all these people who are engaged in this from all over the state?
Really wanted to make sure that
It's really quite
Well,
amazing.
And I get, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go, Chair.
I get a lot of questions. People are excited, you know, it's like, what's happening, what's happening, what? Because
Yes.
talked a lot. How far are you along, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I think they're anticipated seeing probably spending. I don't know what their expectation is, but see how in 1 year's time, and
what we get for it.
and then
What
they
we
also
do.
say, so who are the stakeholders in? Who are you working with? To what right looks like, and this list is pretty impressive.
It's
I'm
awesome.
not sure some of those advocates for youth.
I'll make sure that Andrig and some of the other, talk about those legislators, right? Yeah, I'll make sure they have it.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I did share the initial contact information or this does provide all of the content, all of the stakeholders.
You
I'll
know,
make sure they get it.
EA might be interested in
Yeah,
seeing where we are, so.
We always want to try to make sure, though, that we, just for this reason.
Already, Chair.
Yes.
Also, I understand, but chart, whatever we're gonna call this chart, probably keep everything, it'd be nice having all these, to have everything packaged in one package. Progress that, last time I looked at it, we're a little bit. Which is good. For you. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. All right, we're on to what?
Now the fun begins.
Now the fun begins. 4-point finance is on the roll. Action. 4.5 2019 year-end carry forward balance review and approval. And you're doing that, Scott, yes?
With Deborah.
Deborah, are you coming up? Thank you.
So if you look at the attachment, we kept the balances at a high level. So let me give you just some background on this. When I was brought on in this position about 4 years ago, it was mandated or stipulated by the board that we would do a better job of making sure that we allowed, first and foremost, or shared the information on what balances were remaining or hadn't been executed yet or were carried forward across, because we went to program accounting, right? And then that the board would play an active role in approving what staff recommend would be the use of the carry forward funds, which is what takes place during the October board meeting. So what we're looking for from the committee today is approval for us as the staff. Well, first you review these particular carry forward balances, ask us your questions, and raise any concerns with us, with the intent that you'll take an action to recommend to the Board of Education that these balances as they are be brought to you for specific purpose, right? With how the staff recommend they execute these funds that are left unobligated funds. This is also an opportunity for us as your staff to advise or assist in, question on terminology. What is obligated versus committed versus encumbered? What's unencumbered mean? Anything like that, we want to make sure that we slow down and allow any opportunity for you to ask any questions about any kind of the abbreviations, the funds, education funds, general funds, things like that, that might be relevant to your assisting your fellow board members when time comes in October with staff recommendations on what to do with these balances.
Well, why don't you just go to those 5 words you said and tell us what they are?
Okay, so Deborah, what's encumbered mean?
Encumbered are funds that are there, and you should see it on the board report, when we actually basically fence money, funding for contracts, POs, DOs. It's locking down that funding so it can't accidentally get spent on something else.
Not spent, but it's corralled.
It's not necessarily obligated, because so when we use the word obligated, we mean that contract has been signed. And so there's what we call a instrument or device that has made it become obligated, right? It would take us having to either, stop the contract or do all that. So initially, we come up with basically a spend plan. We say, well, we're going to encumber that, right? And we would say, we've got this fence aside. Then we take the process of entering into some kind of contract, a purchase order, some agreement or things like that makes it.
Well, why would you say something's not unencumbered? Why would you say that? Because aren't they all unencumbered if they're not? Okay.
Or unobligated.
Right,
or-
so nothing else is, okay.
Yeah. Sometimes the terms committed are used, well, it's committed, but it's not quite obligated yet. It's committed to a particular purpose. Not committed.
Well, if it's committed, is it encumbered?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what's the difference between them?
Well,
Not
so
much. But
the money that the board made a motion for charter schools, that's committed for AISU issue, but it's not actually encumbered. That
Yep.
kind of
So what I would say that's corralled with a little fence. And the other one- Hey, I've got to do what works for me, okay?
So for the purpose of the definitions and things like that, as you proceed through this presentation, we can go right to the first line item, which is PAAA, which is the office here, the Office of Education, right? Total carry forward. This is basically the board's budget, right? Well, it's all your budget. It's all your budget, but this is a specific part of your budget.
This isn't just particularly the board, it has multiple appropriation
It also
units.
has Chief Audit Executive Davis's budget in it as well. And that's why we've broken it out by the particular counts, if you will, revenue transfer, substance abuse, underage drinking, sources, if you will, of the funding, and how much the unobligated funds are.
So that's how much is unobligated at this time.
Right. And all of this totals, right, Deborah, all these, the yellow or gold, I guess, I don't know. Yellow numbers highlight or total the total in this line item.
That's unobligated.
It's unobligated, there's no commitment, no.
No encumbrance.
No encumbrance, it's money that you
No
can
corral
use at
around it.
discretion.
No
But the
corrals.
process we take is that we advise you of this in the September meeting, and then if you see that it's right to do so, you make the action to authorize the staff to go forward and provide the full board in October allowable spend plans or uses of these unobligated.
So if we do a follow-up on that, so we have this 25 and we're going to take it and we would say, well, we need this much money for this program because we didn't have enough, like the TSSP, we could take some of this and do that without asking the legislature. Is that what you're saying?
Which funding source you,
Okay, well,
so some
so
of the funding sources are
some are
restricted.
restricted, okay.
Like substance abuse is restricted, the underage
Okay.
drinking is restricted. So we'd have to look at those pieces
Let's see
individually.
what,
The land grant exchange has
oh,
some
I can see them
restrictions.
here, okay.
See, this is the thing too, is we wanted to make sure to also show you that, like, to her example about the substance abuse, there are no unobligated funds there.
Right.
That's actually good news, right? we also wanted to make sure that you were aware that there are programs that are being executed to the full dollar amount. You'll see those on other slides as well.
I just want to make sure, so it says the line item for PAA of total carry forward unobligated.
No, that's the total carry forward of the line
Yeah.
item.
Question you're gonna ask is, what's unobligated?
No kidding, yes. And what is the unobligated amount that we can move? Because I thought that 25 million was the
Yes.
total of all the unobligated
That's how
funds.
the line item actually closed.
So then what is the total of unobligated funds that we could?
So.
Yeah, I think I might have misspoke. I think I might
Total
have said.
unobligated, unrestricted.
Right, because if it's restricted, it's already pulled out, but we have some here that says unobligated.
You can have restricted funds that's
That are unobligated too.
Yes, you can.
What could we?
So look
You
at,
just have to be careful what you spend them on.
recipient. Kind of in the same boat, I'm thinking.
I know.
How, if these funds were initially allocated to, for a
Yeah.
specific use, how could they be moved to another area?
That's why they're restricted.
That's why.
So,
okay, but all of these say they're restricted, so where is
not all
some?
of them. General fund says 0. Restricted.
Oh, there, yeah, wait.
So then can we move that 224,000
Okay,
somewhere?
yeah, we're having a hard time reading this, but maybe Chair, did you have something that you had? You have something
No, I
for-
think you'll.
Okay.
if he
Let
answers
me
it.
try to go at this again in a different way. So in line item PAAA, right, at the end of the year, we closed with a carry forward balance of 25,139,997.45. Not all of that is unobligated. Some of it is obligated, right, or committed. So then what we do is we break it out, and so we have the education funds there of 19,693,522.07. But of that 19 million, 11 plus is obligated, and then by contract, which is again is what's called an instrument that obligates funding, right? Which I was talking to
Oh,
earlier.
so we're subtracting that from the
Yeah,
19.
so see,
Subtracting this from the
right,
19.
so then
Subtracting
another
the
instrument is it's obligated by grants to LEAs, and they necessarily, it's there for them to draw down, so we can't use that.
So we cannot use any of the unobligated funds in the education.
No, you
No,
can't.
we can use the unobligated funds, we
Okay,
can't
you
use.
can't.
Okay,
I
that's
got
what
it.
I was trying to.
Add up all the whites here.
Right.
And that gives you what's left over, and the gold we can use.
So if I add up all the gold, then we can use them somewhere else. Is that correct? Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Depending on the funding source, there's certain things. The federal mineral lease, it's not restricted.
Taken out is what's restricted that we can't use in the gold.
Go ahead, but I don't think so, because they've taken the
I
restricted
thought they
piece
already
out.
took the restricted out. It says here, restricted.
So like on education funds, you've got the obligated by contract, subtract out from the 19. Obligated by grants, subtract out from the 19. Then you've got restricted, the 481, subtract out from the 19, which leaves you this 7 million that you can use, and it's not restricted. You can do whatever. So
So
like.
that's true for all of the other gold
Is it
ones.
true for all of them then? Because so for like example, under the substance abuse one, there's 0 unobligated.
Right.
Because it's restricted. It's all been,
It's all being used. So the gold then, we can take that and use it somewhere else. That unobligated
the gold is,
The gold.
can be used.
can be used, right? Is that, okay.
And we are. Okay, Chair, did you have something?
Okay.
Okay.
So this is all good, but for some of us that are sitting here going, oh, good, we get to spend some money.
That's where I'm going, where you're going.
Hey,
much
I'm going
money?
shopping.
I'm not going, we can
No.
spend some money. I'm just thinking some legislative asks that we have, maybe
that
we
we
could
can
put
offset.
this into it.
Yes, that was my point.
So it
Yeah,
could
two pieces.
lower down our legislative asks.
And I'm not seeing this right now. There's a couple pieces. One is if it's restricted funding that isn't obligated by grant or contract, are we in the decision-making business of how to spend restricted funds. Do we have any restricted funds that are not obligated by contract or grants that we should be talking about? Is that
That this gold should be used for?
not the goal?
Well, what
I'm
about the
trying to keep it
substance?
in the gold or
I
out of
would
the gold?
say the substance abuse is probably one of them.
Yes, for what we were talking about today.
Right, so I believe in statute, it originally said that you would give $500 to each LEA. But I don't know what you would do with $500, and we've had that changed to 1,000. So I think some of these pots of money, it makes it difficult. We hear that it's difficult to get the money out. Whether LEAs don't want to receive the funding or
So
Okay.
let me expand on that a little bit
All
for
right,
today, Chair.
but I still have my thought, and I won't get ran over by my own train of thought, and it's still in my mind, so I'm still not to my happy place.
What Deborah's alluding to is that there's money available for LEAs to draw down, but in some cases, they don't know what they would do with $500, right? So they choose not to draw it down, right? Which is not wrong, but at some point, we need to close those accounts out. And that's another process that we'll be coming to the board with is, some kind of a mandate or rule, if you will. Rebecca's going to talk a little bit more about it in a subsequent agenda item. So all of this discussion we're having is perfect because it relates to other items and issues that we're having that we need. So that's just it, is that as long as that money is there and it's for a purpose or could be drawn down, right, we wouldn't move that money, take it away. It's restricted for that purpose, which, is the substance abuse prevention, which there's, $201,000 of restricted money there. So within that particular program, because we do program accounting, there's no discretionary money or carry forward money there.
Right.
So we don't worry about that. We did want to put these on there, though, to show you, though, that staff are executing dollars to the best of their ability, and we're trying to promote the drawdown from the LEAs. But there are circumstances where the LEA says it takes too much time and too much money when I can't use it for any other purpose. I've maximized the dollars I've drawn down so far, and that's where the legislature is asking us, as staff, to come to you with the board with ideas on how to repurpose that money, right? If we have balances that are carried forward from, like, say, state fiscal year 14, that just shows it's probably not going to get drawn down.
No.
So now's our opportunity to go to the legislature and ask them to make motions that would repurpose that money, and we'll do that. We'll build this with you. We'll build our momentum towards the legislative session. So going back up to the top within the education funds, the unobligated funds of $7 million, typically in the past, this committee has made a recommendation to the board for staff to take action prior to the October meeting to bring back specific plans, or if you will, we call them spend plans, on how to use the
On how to use that.
591, 11631 going forward.
Looking at other spend plans and new spend plans,
Or
both.
potentially, to
Some
your
thinking
point,
dividend.
purposing that money to offset some of the business cases that you reviewed
Okay.
today.
Out of this.
Hopefully what I'm trying to demonstrate to you today is that all of these things that you guys are going through with us as we move together are all interrelated and interoperable together. So the superintendent has set a meeting with the superintendents and the deputies and the assistants to further develop this, in anticipation you would make that action or recommendation to the full board so that we can come back to you with ideas on, potentially using this money for some of the business cases that you reviewed today, all in line with October and the timeline that we've given. The one thing that I do need to make sure that I clarify is this money is typically or almost always one time, right?
Right.
So it's very difficult for us to fund FTEs, positions ongoing in that manner. Most of the time, this money is used for training or, outright purchases of supplies or materials. Sometimes we do increased travel budgets, different just depending on what it is. But we usually, or most of the time or all the time, shy away from using any of this kind of funding for ongoing positions. Okay, I just want to make sure you know that as well.
All right, Chair?
Try to be brief. So, right now, committee, we're getting to this place where a lot of LEAs almost in the same position is that we have all of this funding came to us and it isn't spent. Example, trust land money for they have plans, the LEAs have plans, they get approved, big bucket of money in there, and it's there next year, or the next year. And that is bad for business. Because we're in the education business. The last I heard, we're like the poorest funded. And so when we don't get the water to the end of the row or the funds out into wherever it needs to be, that reflects negatively on us. How could we go back to the well and ask for money when we get the money and we don't get it to the right place? It's not about finding ways to buy a $5,000 hammer or something of that nature. It's about making education happen. So today, in our conversation today, we have, I think we're going to take care of every actionable item, but the way, as I look at budget, we have these unrestricted funds, like the $7 million, and it's not restricted, so there's going to be some priorities that we're going to try to move forward with this funds, because I also believe that we're mandated by some law that we just can't build these giant reserves. I'm trying to remember the something Management Act. Management Act. So we're talking not about our full contingency. We're just talking today, if I'm getting this right, on the unobligated funds that are not restricted that the board can spend or approve spending at our pleasure. Is that correct? Okay, so that's one actionable item, but I still think there's this budget in all of our different budgets. There's restricted funds that we have these fund balances moving forward, but we're not taking action on. Is that correct? Or we're not asking you to take action on?
I think we haven't in the past because we've always seen them as restricted. But now that we have been down to the program and we've really the new chart of accounts, things are coming to light where we may have issues, whether it's from statute or board rule or a lack of funding. Maybe we need more money. Maybe maybe it needs to be repurposed, possibly combined with another program, something like that. Those are things that now we're starting to see and that we can start identifying.
So for our committee moving forward, see this actionable item and give it action on. This isn't it. This isn't the end of it, I should say. Then there's this other piece of these which might mean that we have to go to the legislature, changing, let's see, aren't we going to the legislature pretty quick? So that was where I was wanting to get, Chair, is while we're doing this and that, I see us acting on the unobligated, because we did it last year. When will we be acting on these other funds that I'm talking about? My risk, and that's what we should be doing to be responsible, because we're holding our LEAs to that same accountability standard of ask for it, you got it, why is it not spent? Why is it not spent? Why is it not invested into your part of being spent? Spending is just like blowing. How come it's not there? So my question, so I got this. Today we're talking about the unobligated funds, having staff come back, but when would we talk about the other? That's my question.
I can answer that. At the same time, in October, but even beyond October, all the way up to and then during the legislative session. So one good example that's in front of us right now is the driver's ed funding. There's significant balances in the driver's ed funding. And I want to go on the record saying, I'm not trying to take that funding. It belongs to the LEAs. I mean, I got in trouble the first year I was here talking about
You're
that.
in trouble for everything.
I know.
About the
So-
funding to teach driver's ed or to
Well,
purchase
There's
vehicles?
two sides of it, yeah, there's
Yes,
both
okay.
sides of it, yeah, right.
There's a
Right,
backlog.
so what,
It's very restricted.
so there could be legislative action that takes place, like raising the cap, like raising the amount that we allow for. There's all sorts of different actions that could take place that we're gonna approach the legislature on. And that might not necessarily be all laid out in front of the board in October, but it could be part of the process. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Come up here and,
Because driver's ed is mine, and I have other programs.
could you do this next time instead?
I was just like,
We couldn't see your hand because you don't have long arms and long legs.
I even wore red so they would point out to me. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. As we have this conversation, I'm aware we have some programs like driver's ed, CPR, and some others that Deb and I have talked about digging into and seeing what potentially might make sense in terms of coming and saying, we need this change, or give us less money and we'll give this back to you, or whatever it might need to be for a different purpose, like repurposing the money. Driver's ed has a substantial, CPR has a substantial. We have programs, but they're so restricted. If we opened up how they could be spent, then that money would actually get spent down. But when you're given too much, given the restrictions, it just has to sit because it's too constrained. So we're very happy to work with finance and figure this out.
How long has it been
For
accruing?
example, like a CPR, I think we're 2, 3, or 4 years behind spending the current allocation. So we have 200,000 that comes in every year. That's never been touched. So we talked this week about going through the line items and seeing where we aren't spending money, and then working with the program person to say, where's the opportunity here, or what's the challenge, so that we can start coming with proactive solutions towards that.
I think Deborah said something and it really hit me. Are we talking about a statute issue or a rule issue or both?
Generally
both,
statute,
sometimes
but
they're different.
potentially could be a
Okay.
rule.
Sometimes they're one or the
I'm
other.
a statute.
Most of the time statute. So that's, I think we need to be really clear. We have a problem here and it's because of statute, or we have a problem here, it's because of rule.
So honestly, I know we presented business cases and such today. There might be more legislative request changes for language to
Yes.
either open up the funding, so like driver's ed has very clear
It's an easy one to
distinctions. It has an opportunity, right? And I think CPR, given how it's currently funded, we either broaden, around life-saving behavior and practices, or you say we only need about $50,000 a year. You just are either getting too much towards the program, or it's so restricted we can't really operationalize it any broader.
I like the second terminology better. It's so restricted because we never get too much.
It's given us too small of parameters to actually work within the
Yeah,
amount
so-
provided, yeah. Because you think $200,000 at an LEA level or at state level would not seem like money you couldn't spend.
And so I have a question on driver's ed, just for clarity. The pot is here and we distribute to, everybody gets what they need or want. And so there's just still, they're not asking for it, we're not holding it.
Because of the restrictions. So one of the things they're asking for is gas money.
Gas money. Yeah, but they're asking not in the restricted lanes.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Now, I appreciate Jennifer coming forward, but basically she's just said everything I was saying. You know,
I'm
so-
reinforcing.
So the restricted part of the driver's ed needs to be
It's a
changed
problem.
by code.
Yeah, I got it.
It's not something that, to your point, Chair Huntsman, that we can just arbitrarily do. Her staff has to come up with ideas and we carry those into the legislative session, so.
I'm asking for a charge to staff to do that. I mean, we'll do it anyway, but if you would charge us, that makes it even more timely.
Okay.
That makes sense. We would love to go through and analyze and see where we could.
Sure.
And the legislators are asking us,
Yes.
For clarity.
so it comes through this committee. So
Yes.
I'm gonna go back to, we have this unobligated funds that's easy to talk about today and say, Scott, staff, bring it to our next meeting.
That's what
We're ready for
Are
it.
we too late by next meeting?
I don't
No,
see
no,
any
okay.
unobligated funds for driver's ed.
We're not
No.
talking driver's ed. Turn all of that off. We're talking only, I'm gonna go back to colors of money. This is
Right.
money that's green that we're used to having in our wallet.
We just switched and my brain didn't switch with you.
What's your problem?
So this is where we're at today, and this is what will give direction, but in the same vein, because hijack this meeting. I want to make sure that this isn't the end of the game.
Oh,
And I'm
can't
trying
we?
to get this all figured out, is there's additional funding that's restricted that we have to roll our sleeves up and go to work on and repurpose, something. Right? And then I'm trying, and I was trying to see those balances in this presentation, and I couldn't. That's where the confusion
Yes,
is.
there is confusion on that, so.
I'm bowing out of it.
No,
because we
you're
gotta
not. No,
focus
no, no,
on
no,
the-
no.
on the
Okay,
unobligated.
Scott?
So there's two parts to this, right? So this agenda item is specific to these gold unobligated balances, but then you're gonna get more information from Rebecca on what we're seeing in the grants management system specific to programs that are restricted, where we
Okay.
need to make decisions on repurposing, that restricted money and/or mandating that, hey, look, if you don't draw it down by a certain year, maybe 2 years or things like that, that's what she's gonna talk to you about in a subsequent agenda item.
In the
So it's a
year-end
different color of
accruals,
money.
It's a different color of money, yes, and what's that?
in the year-end accruals,
No,
Well,
it's the,
why can't she come up and talk to us now?
We
Well,
just
she
go
could.
ahead and do the
Next
unobligated.
agenda item.
it's the very next agenda item, so you can go into that. But we really need to Jennifer, to my point, we really respectfully request that the finance committee members take action to recommend to the board that the staff come back with plans on how to use
The unobligated.
the unobligated funding.
Recommend that to the board, do we?
Yes.
We do, we have to
Yes.
change the,
I thought we recommend it to staff to bring it back to us,
Well, okay.
right?
Get Teslas for driver's ed.
we make that recommendation, doesn't
Yes.
take up board action in their meeting, and if we come back and we have good data, we can actually put it on the agenda
Okay,
and not have to come back, so
all right, so,
I would like to make a motion.
okay, so just hold it.
Somebody got a motion over here?
I was gonna let you do
So
the motion.
moved on what you said.
I think my biggest worry is like the carry forward, is to make sure we can do it timely, because my department, I'm gonna own it, has not done a great job of spending our money down. But if I have to keep waiting to spend that money, it gives us a shorter time frame to spend it in. So I have a little urgency in my heart, because I would love to show you I can spend money. But the longer it takes to be able to spend that money, makes it harder for me to spend it. Does that make
So,
sense?
but
So-
we can't do it out of here
I know.
anyway, so.
But how you guys,
What do I do? What do we do?
Okay, so the motion is what? Be very clear, tell me what it is.
The motion is for the board to approve the recommendations of staff for execution of the unobligated balances from year-end close, state fiscal year 19.
And are those,
in October board,
In the October board meeting.
are
that warms
those,
my heart.
I don't think you can yet, because we haven't seen them.
Because we haven't seen them.
Well,
So
okay,
what we can do is give direction.
But you would see them as a full
to
board.
Prepare for the next
Board
board
meeting.
meeting. Their spend plans, or however they wanna, whatever we're gonna do.
So
on
why
it.
can't we make that motion?
Or board review and
Seen
approval.
the plans.
Okay. One more.
You wanna review them and approve them, but not just say we're going to approve.
Finance, it's
No,
gonna come.
it's
to
going to the full board.
To the board.
But, yeah, but I thought you said that we were saying we approve this and we
approve
want
the
them
spend
to,
plans
but we
for
don't
the-
because we haven't seen them. So we approve that
okay,
you
I know,
bringing
I
it
see what you're
forward,
saying. Okay.
okay?
To
Got it, Cammy?
No, hang on a sec though.
He's gonna restate.
Okay, we just had an audit. We just had an audit on year-end close. And one of the findings that was brought up was the board needs to review the closing package, right?
Yes.
So we're, now this isn't the whole package, but what we're doing is we're putting this in front of you for, I know you're not the whole board, I know you're the finance committee. But basically what Deborah has put here in front of you is what we sent up to state finances saying what our carry forward balances are, right? It's not the whole package, but it's part of the overall review because the whole package will be also in the consent calendar in the board meeting in October, right? So what we're asking for is that you said you've reviewed these, and now we take the further action in front of the whole board, saying,
We're on the same page.
okay.
We're on the
okay,
same
I just
page.
wanna make sure, just because,
We're gonna show it on,
there's
yeah,
an audit.
we're on the same page.
We got it.
So, okay.
Thank you, and that helps
think
with
we were
my
all on the same
urgency, so.
And for the record, Deputy Superintendent Jones, Scott Jones is not taking driver's ed money away.
Thank you, sir.
All right, does anyone have any discussion on this in the audience?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
There you go, Cammie. We did it something right. Oh, look, why do you need candy? I've had this much already.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jennifer.
thank you. Okay, so Rebecca, we're on to
I heart all of you.
information about the year-end accrual. We are on 4.7.
No, we need to.
Skip 4.6.
Don't skip 4.6, ma'am.
Oh,
please.
4.6, state grant carry forward and reimbursement timelines.
Remember, you wanted me to come up and just talk about this.
I know.
Rebecca Nielsen,
I was just going
grants
right on.
manager with financial operations. We now have a grants management system with Utah Grants that helps us to make the grants that we are making to our LEAs and to our community-based organizations a lot more transparent. We can see all of the awards that have been given. We can see all of the money that has been spent much easier now than we could a year, 2 years ago. We worked very hard over the last year and put together all of our carry forward balances for any money that had been awarded but unspent entering into the Utah grant system. That was a lot of work because there were a lot of loose ends that needed to be gathered up. Those have been all gathered. Everything now is in the system from the beginning of time all the way up through our 2020 grant programs are in Utah grants. We have a handful of 2018 fiscal year grants that are awarded but unspent from our LEAs. We have had requests to either allow them more time to spend that money, so extend the grant from the typical 1-year grant period to a 2-year grant period, or allow them more time to submit reimbursement requests. What we are looking for is some guardrails or some direction on potential for an agency-wide policy or practice on when can we say this money needs to go back into the pool for us to reallocate and re-restrict. You didn't spend this money within this year period of time. You have not submitted for reimbursements within X number of days. We'd like to reallocate this for an LEA that can use this money or for a different purpose. So the items that we would like to look at outside of this group, that we're bringing it to the committee for discussion, make sure that we're going the right direction, and then we'll explore it further and bring it back for your approval. We would like to explore in committee, can we extend grant period of performance from 1 year to multiple years? And if so, who approves that? Or can we extend or limit? What are the guardrails on how long does it take? How long can an LEA take to submit a reimbursement request?
So basically, I think is along the lines of what Chair Huntsman was articulating earlier, is we've got balances in some of these grants from 14, from state fiscal year. And it's not that, if anything, we should praise the fact that they're not drawing that down and not wasting it, right? Just to spend it. You know, so I think that's good. You know, we have just reached a critical point, though, that where we have so much money that, you know, I mean, I thought you made that well, Chair, is that, you know, it just looks like we're just sitting on all this money, right? When really it's because it's restricted. So we feel by bringing this to you that first and foremost, we need to put those guardrails up. We need to say, look, you know, if you don't spend it within a certain amount of time, then we're going to take it and repurpose it, right? And it's reasonable, and we get LEA input, we help with this process. The thing is, though, is we're not sure if it's just a policy, or maybe it's something we need to put into rule, you know, just because
Has a little
it has a little more than just, you know.
So Rebecca, I would ask you a question. What, grants are always different lengths, okay?
Typically, a state grant is a year.
It's typically a year,
It's
okay.
fiscal year.
So I'm wondering, and you may have better ideas, but if it's a year, then they have that year and they have the next year to get everything in or spent, or what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on that is you have all of that year to incur the costs, right? So you need to incur the cost during the year in which the grant was funded, And then you have a period of time to do some cleanup, some accounting, some invoicing after that, say 45 days after the close of that period. So what I would propose is you need to expend your funds in the year that was given, and then you have an additional 45 days to submit a reimbursement request.
Okay, so if it's a year, does the year end on June 30th? Okay, and so,
Unless in statute, there's a restriction, and that, there are some grants that extend it more than 1 year.
okay, and what if?
Right. That is my question. What if the request comes in to extend that? How do we do that? Who gets to approve that? Are there exceptions?
I wasn't even asking about what if they don't turn them in.
Okay.
And so,
What was your what if?
they're
Sorry.
all the what ifs, okay?
there are a lot of
Chair,
what ifs.
you have a question?
Well, I just have a kind of a reality check on how all this works. Everyone aggressively puts in their grant applications. They have good intentions to do something. And so they get in, they get approved, the clock starts ticking. Some of them, it's got to hire this specialist, I've got to do this, and I can't find him, I can't. Circumstances out there that can't perform. So maybe you can test drive this a little bit, and then we can get some LEA feedback. But if we have a plan, and you have a grant application, it says for this year, that they have a real tight, business administrators and that are really busy. Hears about it all the time, but really like a 90-day, probably a fair amount of time to say, get your reimbursements in for payment and or get your extension in. The different, it's almost like a reapplication or end plan. They're gonna tweak that one chance or one opportunity. And then if not, then you get to 6 months after that calendar year and there's no activity, you should have a policy say you forfeited it.
And that's exactly the direction that we're wanting to know if
And then,
that's where we.
I mean, but so we put these timelines in, but then whatever these timelines are, we've got to test drive them with the LEAs, and we're not going to I don't believe we're
But I
gonna.
think if you come back, what rule would this fit in? Have you looked to see where? But maybe we can work on drafting some language that would fit in there, which will give our LEAs an opportunity to have voice in it and say, that's not gonna work for us, this is a problem. If you're working on draft rule. And then the extension, maybe we do one or both. Everyone feel okay with that?
It needs to be in a public.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Committee and publicly.
Definitely want the LEA's input, right, to make sure that we don't run into a situation where, well, I can't spend it, but I do need it extended. Offer that opportunity, right? We just want to make sure we're able to
it's
justify.
consistent.
And it's consistent to justify the legislature. Well, there's just carry forward balances. However, it'll be put to good use in another year or two. However.
Justify why that needs to be carried over.
It's very hard for us to really go back, and say, well, yeah, why haven't we spent a balance from 2014? Even though it might be only like $65,000 or something.
It's still 65.
I know.
It's like 30 in the EHS.
Yeah,
You
they
get
add
$1
up.
million really quick,
They
and
add up.
several $1 million.
Yes, little pots here. So do you feel like you have good direction? Okay,
Thank you.
We'll deal with Angie.
thank
So
you.
that'll come back through the executive.
Yeah,
committee
it'll
to
come
see what-
to see where it should go. Yep. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to 4.7, end of year accruals. That's kind of such a fun word to say, accruals. It's not as fun as bubble, but.
So, since we've been here, we've actually changed this methodology now. This is the third time that we've changed this methodology. And so we want to present this to you and make sure we're on track. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay. So we've just kind of expanded on this. In 2017, the accrual is actually what we still owe the LEAs for activities in 2019, till 21, kind of a thing. In 2017, this accrual was actually calculated by a formula. There was no way of knowing how much money we actually had awarded out there to LEAs. There was no way to really tie it down. So there was a formula that was developed to come up with this amount. So basically just a shot in the dark, really. In 2018, we went into the new chart of accounts. And at that point, we were able to easily see in the accounting system how much money was awarded to the LEAs and how much was still outstanding that we still had to pay them, or money that they still had available to them. The part that was difficult there was the fact that we have no idea when LEAs are going to seek that reimbursement or how much that will be. And so again, it was still kind of a little bit of a shot in the dark. This year, we were actually able to, now with the new grants management system, we can actually identify what quarters or months, actually all the way down to the month, right, Rebecca? Down to the month, what months they did not seek reimbursement for. And we were able to then prorate the amount, because the federal grants are generally over 27 months, the amount of the accrual. So still not completely accurate, but more accurate than we've ever been. We were also able to take the actual amount from August, the true accrual amount from August, which we haven't been able to do in the past either. The state grants, again, they're a year, so anything that still has not been, LEAs haven't sought reimbursement, they're all part of the accrual. So I guess what we're looking for is if we're good with that methodology. I don't know that we're gonna be able to get it any tighter than that, because of the unknown part where you don't know how much the LEAs are gonna spend and at what point they'll be able to submit.
Is this a certain account or a conglomerate?
It's all grants that are out to LEAs, state and federal. And actually, in the past, we really didn't do the state and federal, and now we're doing
In an effort to be accountable, this has been our problem in the past. Here, definitely a better for before. However, it's not exact, and the risk of maybe if we miss it, I mean.
That's a good question. Well, I wonder what Debbie would
What
tell
risk
us.
are we taking? As if we're
Deborah, what maybe we should ask.
consequences.
But if you don't think we can get it any tighter, first of all, I would ask maybe, why can't we?
that unknown of the, so an LEA gets an allocation of $1 million and they can spend that over 27 months. They could spend 50,000 in the first month, wait, 15 months and submit for another 50,000, and you just have no idea where that target is or how much they'll spend during those periods. It's
Trend data,
yes.
assumptions. I looked at your assumptions and I'm like, how you could get any better.
That's what I think too, because with the variables in there.
Yeah.
In an open meeting. From I remember I used to have 70, 180.
Say, are we 178 or something? What are we? Who knows? Come on, Jared.
proposed, the actions, this is a action item here, and I didn't read.
Yeah.
I didn't read what the proposed action was. It was based, I thought that it was accept. Action would be.
You actually have information. Uh-huh.
40% actual now.
Oh, yeah, we're 4.7, aren't we?
Yep. So we're okay.
Okay. The only way we could get this any better if we really strong-armed our LEAs to.
They're also different that,
And they're all so unique.
so.
There's a big difference between the
Do
federal
you-
grants and the state grants.
Sean, Michelle, do you have any concerns that you haven't brought up on this?
No, I'm thinking the same way we do our best and that's all we can.
Well, I love that we have a little bit of trend data, and so we kind of can work from that as well, so. Okay, thank you. Okay, Tamara, should we wait for Angie or move ahead?
See, I think we probably did, but I prefer you.
Text, but she hasn't answered, so I'm assuming. Do 4.9?
We'll go ahead. Oh, she's fine with it.
Mark Peterson says 41 districts.
158. Thank you, Mark. This year's current number, right? 1920? Yeah. Okay, we are on 4.8. It's an action item for 277-407, school fees. It's the song that never ends, and it won't, and which is just fine, because we want to get it right. Scott?
Yeah, it's all, so Cammie, did you say, is she coming or?
I text her, she hasn't responded, so I'm assuming she's probably still
We
presenting.
can proceed, but, oh, there she is, okay. I just want to make sure Ange had a chance to get you.
We wanted to do it without you. We're trying.
Everything, look at that.
We were talking about discipline, physical restraint, and seclusionary timeouts upstairs.
Well, that doesn't tell you, but watch your knees, both of you there. Okay, so we are working at some more amendments, and introduce yourselves, and Tamara, is this coming from the spend plan group?
Yes.
New amendments,
Yes.
okay.
I'm Tamara Daly with the School Fees Project Team. And as Laura mentioned, we just wrapped up a group, kind of give us some input regarding spend plans, which is one element of the fee schedule for school fees.
And I'm Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. And so we, based on the recommendations that the spend plan group provided, we codified their recommendations into draft 2 of the rule. And I was just pulling up the rule right now. I don't know if you want any additional background on the spend plan work group, because Tammy would be the best to answer those questions, or if you'd like us to just jump right into the rule. What would you prefer? Okay, so let's, we're looking at draft 2. Off of.
While you're just pulling that up, I want you to know the spend plan was awesome, and Tammy did a great job. And the communication was great, and we came up with, we learned a lot from different people in the field on this one, so.
Yes, we got good feedback. So the first, let's start. One of the big changes that were made is, or a piece of feedback we received was the definition of textbook included the cost of Wi-Fi to access school required digital content. And part of the recommendation, sorry, it's line 178.
Thank you.
So part of the recommendation was to eliminate that from the definition of textbook and instead insert the language on the bottom of page 10, so that's line 280. There. Sorry. So there's a section in here, and board members who served on the school fees task force may remember that we had the definitions of fee, and one of the definitions that was becoming increasingly larger and larger was, what is a class, activity, class, or program provided, sponsored, or supported by a school? And let's give some examples. So these are all of section 5 are examples of activities, programs, or classes that are provided and are therefore subject to fee waiver. So instead, we included it here that the cost to access software, digital content, or other instructional materials required as part of an activity, course, or program is fee waivable. So if an LEA, for example, relies on students going home after school and accessing homework through the cloud or through the internet, then that would be something that would be subject to fee waiver. But Wi-Fi isn't necessarily always applicable or available. So I hope that helps. So that was the first recommendation.
Angie, I have a question on that, because how are they gonna access digital content? So they'd have to have a device.
And Wi-Fi potentially. So it could be that if they had the device, but they were able to download the content, they did not need to access Wi-Fi. And then, so it's not about Wi-Fi, it's about whatever it takes to access the software, digital content, or instructional materials.
It's still a conundrum question.
Yes.
Okay? You know, so, because just for example, we buy Wi-Fi for our kids. They don't have it.
And we heard from my Canyon's representative, I don't know if he's an IT specialist, and he talked about a program that they have in Canyon School District for families at the secondary schools, and they did a pilot for one of their elementary schools for families who don't have Wi-Fi. And they, Board Member Belknap, I think you were there, he talked about the increases in proficiency in the students' reading. Their English language arts at this elementary, it improved dramatically, because some of the students, anyway, that
They could quote unquote practice at home or have access at home. Michelle?
I just have a question. How many schools are still using textbooks versus the digital? Because it seems a lot more now digital, and they're doing away with textbooks. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, we didn't collect that data, but digital teaching and learning probably have a better sense for that. But the anecdotal information that we were receiving was that there's largely a hybrid. There's a lot on Wi-Fi and stuff, but then they have their classwork. So because I was surprised, what was quoted from the Canyons guys, that a lot of schools have also gone to online registrations.
Right.
But they're having, and I heard this from Provo, not just from Canyons, but they're seeing upwards of 20 to 25% of students aren't able to register online. They still have to come in and register because they don't have access or don't have the ability.
Or they can't read it because it's in
there's
English.
still a
There's so many
large-
reasons.
Large number that don't have.
We're just not in the rural areas. We're still in the textbook business, unfortunately.
And so this way they could
Why do we
download the
textbooks?
content.
I mean, I'd rather a textbook than
But I'm just,
Wi-Fi, but I'm just wondering, like,
They could download the book, or it could be an electronic book that they could take
Right.
home or whatever. So this would.
so that
for a
would
minute,
cover it.
This suffices me, but only for a minute.
Okay,
We'll time that minute.
so should I move on to the
Yeah,
next
sorry,
part?
Ann.
So no, you're fine.
Okay,
Page 12, lines 323 through 328, or actually 326 or 328. So just some additional clarification on what has to be included as part of the fee. And this language clarifies that an LEA shall include the total per student amount expected to be received through required group fundraising as part of the maximum fee amount for activity. So if they're doing an individual voluntary fundraising, that's not included. If it's fundraising done by adults, you know, at the, what do they call those, silent auction, it's only required group fundraising, and that has to be included as part of the fee that is approved by the board per activity per school.
Sure, I like that. So you're saying that, like, for my son's soccer team, they do a group fundraiser, then he's required then
no,
bring in a certain amount
No,
sold? Oh,
no.
that's how I
It's
read
not
that.
quota.
no.
It's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the group may make $150 each kid. So the amount would be, is that right?
It's kind of this idea that in the past, all that was put on the fee was the amount that you might pay out of pocket, say the 300. And then parents didn't know that there was also going to be a group fundraiser, and that through that group fundraiser, you were going to it was going to bring in extra money. So now absent of this language already, an LEA is required to include in that fee. So let's say it's 500, they expect the parent will pay 3, and then through the group fundraising, they're gonna get another 200. Then you post the 500 on their fee schedule.
Yeah.
So it's not anything that the student has to do.
The student has to sell a certain amount,
No.
because then I'm like,
No, no. Okay.
Yeah, fundraising is now part of the fee definition, and they wanted to ensure that the time and effort that parents have to spend in these group fundraisers is known up front also, and part of that maximum, it's also part of the maximum amount that is supposed to be per student.
And that will go to the next, this is a great segue to page 19. If you go to lines 521 through 526, you'll see that the group fundraising, individual and group fundraising policies of a district now have to include a requirement that a school, sorry, I'm trying to scroll there and read at the same time. Am I almost there? Okay, there we go. That shall include a requirement that a school notify parents of required group fundraising, letting parents and students know how and when specific details will be provided about the group fundraiser. So you can see the specific details they have to include are description of the nature of the required group fundraiser, the estimated participation time required of the student or parent for the group fundraiser. And so the policy will mandate, essentially, the way we heard this is if you, let's say that you're the football coach. Usually football coaches will have kind of a syllabus or a explanation document that says, we'll have practices this many times. If you miss this many practices, you're no longer on the travel team. And in that is where you would say, we do 1 or 2 group fundraisers. We expect it'll be, 2 Saturdays in October or in July. So that's essentially what it's saying, is that the LEA's policy will make sure that each activity provides notice to parents of the expectations related to group fundraising.
I'm talking about line 521. The way I read it before, it says exactly the same thing of notification to letting parents and students know how. Curious, the wordsmithing that's kind of going on. Is it going to end?
No.
Because every time we bring this rule up and we're tweaking it, I believe we're putting an excuse out there of how come we can't get in compliance. Guys up here, we just don't shut it down. So
It was the spend plan that created this again.
I understand,
Jared.
but every time you open up a rule, the rule can get hijacked
Yep.
for a whole bunch of other things. I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but that is kind of my concern. I mean, I like how it reads, but it reads a little better.
Just put it to bed then.
We have 127 or 47 changes to, and this over time, fatigue a lot of people.
Including this committee.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just sitting here. I'm going.
Well, but our LEAs are wanting to get. They want to just check it off and be.
They're all saying to their people, we're working through this, and the state board is working with. We really have a year to get it right, and all of this, and now we're pushing into the year that they're supposed to be getting it right with more requirements. So, do you think this is going to be?
I hope,
Who's going to bring it back for more changes?
we hope not anyone, especially since it goes January 1.
Okay.
And I'm already getting a lot of pressure to make sure that we have out there right now what they need to do. And I think the impetus to this was we put out as a school fees team the document, the info document, and I had specified, well, here's your fee schedule. You got to have it April 1, 2020, and this is what's got to be on it. And there was a huge outroar and difference of opinion as to what actually needed to be on that schedule. And so as a work group, spend plan work group, we call it the spend plan work group. That was only one element of that fee schedule. And what should that fee schedule look like? Because we have a horrendous amount of variety as we get into these LEAs. So we're trying to make some effort to say what you got to tell somebody April 1 and and what it's gonna describe.
Yeah, and if you remember, this committee kind of authorized that spend plan to, work group to be created. So we don't plan to have any other policy-making work groups unless the board asks us to do it. I think it was that, anyway, that's the issue, is we had BAs and finance people who felt like they hadn't been included in the upfront policy-making or recommendations as much, and so that spend plan work group was an opportunity for them to give input, and this is, yeah.
Okay.
So,
We're there, boss, we're there.
So, and then the other issue, which is right above, is 417, 418. Student membership is generally on a team or group. You don't have membership in an activity. So there were a couple of ways this was written, but the ultimate recommendation of also the Superintendent's Association and a couple of representatives of our charter schools, they felt like if we're talking about student membership, let's just delete any language about the activity, because you generally don't have membership in an activity. So I don't know if anybody has any objection to that or questions. And then the last one, I think, comes on lines 575, is that it?
Yes.
Through 580. And this is also requiring some additional information about the spend plan, or providing some context about what the purpose of a spend plan is. So if you look at line 575 through 576, it's provides students, parents, and employees transparency by identifying a fee's funding uses. And then 577 through 580, the LEA or school spend plan shall identify the needs of the activity, course, or program for the fee being charged, and shall include a list or description of anticipated types of expenditures for the current fiscal year or as carryover for use in a fiscal year funded by the fee charged. So if they're gonna save a portion of it, because every 5 years they buy new pads, they would say this portion of the fees for pads, this portion of the fees for travel, this portion of the fees for food, etc. So, and I believe that's it.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Any questions from those in the audience or comments? Okay, back to committee. Somebody?
Oh,
Okay, I move to accept the amendments to R 227-0407 draft 2 as amended. Further,
I'd recommend.
recommend for
Second and final reading. Phew, that's a lot. That's a lot. Any discussion by committee? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Foley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry's here.
His people did.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Whew. All right, we are on to 4.9, 277-927 Teacher and Student Success Account TSSA Amendment. Who's speaking to this, Scott? Oh, Miss Angie, I knew you were doing two of them.
So recently, the sponsor of this rule, remember, is regarding the TSSA, or Teacher and Student Success Act program. And in a prior version of the rule, we had explicitly stated that preschool programs could not be funded. If you look on line 112, an LEA may not use program money to support adult education or preschool programs. It came to our attention from multiple people that when in the bill it says early childhood education, and I'm trying to get to that definition. So if you look at lines 34 and 35, in the statute, it states that TSSA may be used, the LEAs may use that money for early childhood education. We were told that the legislative intent was for early education to include preschool programs. So to honor that, this version does just those two things. It strikes preschool programs from the may not list below, and then it qualifies on lines 34 and 35 that early childhood education includes preschool programs. And it is not a defined term in code, so we are not redefining. It's just used, and then we are defining it here, since it's not defined in code, for clarification. That's it.
Hey, any discussion by committee?
Well, that actually makes a lot more sense.
Anyone in the audience? You, back to committee?
I move that we approve R277-927, is this draft one? Draft one, and recommend to the board on second and final.
Discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Hey, and I have to go back to 4.8. Chair, don't shoot the messenger.
Oh, is that school fees?
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologize for that, but Carol sent me something just before this meeting started, and I just want to bring it up. Something about it becomes effective on January 2020.
January 1.
Uh-huh. But some parts aren't effective until 21-22. Is that clear in the rule?
It is in the road announcement code.
Okay.
You have the textbooks that come on in 2 years, but you have the cost, activity-based costing fees cannot exceed the cost. That's the next school year, which is the 2021, and the 21-22 is the textbooks. And they are specifically stated also in
All
code.
through, okay.
And also in
In
rule.
statute and in rule.
Okay,
Yeah, so
and
they're
then
very
line
specific.
254, I
That's
just want to
the
honor her
kindergarten-
questions.
supplemental kindergarten, right.
Yes, it's the supplemental kindergarten questions. She said she was thinking that might need to be, is there more of an explanation
There's
of
a
what that is?
definition that was added last time.
That was last time, okay.
Yeah, so there's the definition, then there's the statements, there's two pieces to that.
Okay.
And I think
I
with the
thought we added
definition,
it,
yeah,
and
we
I
added the
read
definition last time.
Okay,
So
all right.
Okay,
Then I feel very happy that, and if she has
I-
more questions, I'll send her to you.
please do.
All right, we are adjourned.
On this committee.
Can I just stay here and not go back to lawn licensing?
Okay, just kidding. Can I tell you this?
Can I just say, I don't either? I mean, I enjoy talking about laws.
So Sid sends me a message that says, you realize your committee's faces are on the screen in standards and assessment.
Oh, they are?
She said, I feel like I'm in both meetings. I said, well, I'll be sure not to pick my nose. Thank you. We're still hot though, right?
Probably.
Like so.
Are we ever on?
Yeah, we are. Do you need this, Cammie? Too? Thank you so much. Thanks for all my treats. Look at all this junk I've eaten.
I've got these snacks for the drive home.
Oh, I'm so happy.
I am too.
I'm so happy. Did you try your cookie, Sean?
What, cookies?
I did.
Laura
It's a
did.
miracle,
You
okay?
made them last night?
No, the night before.
They were like lifesaver to me.
I just want you to know that
I inhaled my salad.
first of all, I don't cook and I don't bake, period. And so like when I do it for my Sunday school kids, I go, this is an act of love.
You just tell her your bag was empty.
Like, maybe Scott doesn't like peanut butter.
Laura, Sean's bag was empty.
I don't know.
Huh?
I missed
Just had
somebody
crumbs in
came
it.
and got one. I don't know why they did
Being
that.
efficient.
Go fast.
Yeah, but you gotta still cover it, but you don't have to.
See everybody.
They drive safely.
We have the perfect
You get in
committee. Be
trouble.
careful.
No, you've got a good committee.
You get in
With
trouble,
the
call.
board members that moved out of state, you know, that over-responded.
Hey, Sean.